What happens after we die? I mean, it's the question, right? It's shaped pretty much everything about us, our civilizations, our beliefs, for thousands of years. Well, in this explainer, we're diving into a really profound paper that doesn't just ask that question. It explores a real-life testimony that suggests the answer isn't an end, but a relationship that just keeps going. At the absolute center of this paper is this incredibly powerful human story. We're talking about a bond between twin brothers that was so strong, it seems like it just refused to be broken by death. This personal account is the heart of the whole thing. Now, this isn't just a story about grief or, memory. Based on his experiences, the author, Chard, puts forward a pretty bold question. What if death isn't an end at all? What if it's just a transformation, a change that actually allows a connection to keep going in a way you can still perceive? Okay, so to really get what the author is arguing, we have to start where he did, with the personal story that kicked this whole thing off. This is where all those big, abstract ideas about life and death get real, grounded in something we can all relate to. So the main people in this story are Mark and his twin brother, Darren. And Mark describes their connection as a twin soul bond, this idea that they were almost like one soul in two bodies. He testifies that after Darren passed away, this incredibly deep spiritual relationship didn't just fade, it continued in very real, tangible ways. And we're not just talking about feelings or dreams here. No way. The paper details specific events, prophetic messages, incredible revelations using light, and even what he describes as appearances. And here's the kicker. It wasn't just him. These experiences were independently witnessed and documented by a psychic medium named Kenny Corus. All right, now this is where the story gets really, really mysterious. Because beyond any direct communication, something else started happening. A strange and powerful symbolic language began to show up, one based on simple, ancient geometry. So just try to picture this in a vision. The first thing that appeared was this precise, ordered pattern. Perfect rows and columns of black squares and black circles. It's stark, it's structured, and, well, it's deeply mysterious. You'd be asking, what in the world does that mean? But then, get this, the very next evening, the vision comes back. The exact same pattern of squares and circles, but this time it was completely transformed. It was no longer black, but this brilliant, radiant white. The structure was the same, but its whole essence had totally flipped. So that's the core of the mystery, isn't it? Darkness and then light. The same form, but expressed in two totally opposite ways. This becomes the central puzzle the paper sets out to decode, asking, what's the message hidden in this geometry? To find an answer, the author turns away from modern interpretations and looks way back to ancient, cross-cultural systems of meaning, frameworks that have used symbols to explain the nature of reality for centuries. And the primary tool for this decoding is something called sacred geometry. Now, this isn't your high school math class. It's the idea that fundamental shapes are actually reflections of a divine, cosmic order. They're like a visual language that can express the relationship between the spiritual and the material, between heaven and earth. Okay, so check this out. This is how it starts to make sense. In tons of sacred traditions, the square represents earth. It's stable, structured material. The circle, on the other hand, represents heaven. It's infinite, no beginning, no end, a symbol of spirit and eternity. So the vision then was showing these two realms together. But what about the color change, right? From black to white? Well, the paper interprets that as a kind of symbolic journey. The black geometry, that represents the material world, its limitations and its mysteries. But the radiant white, that signifies revelation and spiritual illumination. It's the same reality, but now unveiled and filled with divine light. And this is not some new or isolated idea. The paper points out that this very symbolism, the union of the square and the circle, is basically a universal language. You see it everywhere. In Chinese cosmology, in the square foundations and circular windows of Christian cathedrals, in intricate Hindu mandalas, and in the Native American medicine wheel, it's an ancient global symbol for the harmony of all creation. So, how does all this build into the paper's main argument? Well, the author takes this universal symbolism and places it directly within a Christian theological framework, arguing it's a living expression of core beliefs. A really key concept here is the communion of saints. This is the theological idea that the bond between all believers, both living and departed, is not broken by death. It's a spiritual fellowship in Christ that goes beyond the physical world, suggesting that love and connection are truly eternal.
So the paper argues these experiences aren't just random anomalies. It actually draws parallels to a long tradition of divine encounters. I mean, think of Elijah being taken to heaven, the blinding light of Christ's transfiguration, or St. Paul's vision of the third heaven. All of these accounts describe a boundary between our world and the divine that's, well, a little porous.
So, after grounding the testimony in personal experience, decoding it with universal symbols, and situating it within theology, the paper arrives at its huge conclusion about the very nature of life, death, and reality itself. And here it is, the ultimate thesis. The author proposes these visions aren't just for personal comfort. He argues they are foretastes, little glimpses, small previews of a promised new creation, where that separation between heaven and earth finally begins to dissolve. And this idea is just captured perfectly in the paper's own words. It suggests a universe where the veil between worlds isn't a solid wall, but a porous membrane. A universe where the divine is not distant, but is actively and continuously reaching into our reality. So the paper concludes with this powerful idea that these might just be signs of heaven coming home, fulfilling an ancient promise. And it leaves us with one final thought-provoking question. If the author is right, and the veil between worlds really is thinning, what else might we begin to see?